Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm so glad for you all to be here and for us to be having this conversation on expanding the meaning of family through a feminist lens. We're going to get started in just a second as a few more folks join the meeting. I know that we have folks calling in from all over the country today. There are a few from outside of the country today, so very excited. And we have folks here that you see on screen that are based in California, in Oregon, and in New York. All right, so I think we're going to get started. So I'll introduce myself first. My name is Christina Fialho. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the founder and president of Rewrite the BiLine. Rewrite the BiLine works to create film, television, and media narratives that reshape cultural norms and drive policy change to advance health equity, economic opportunity, and civil rights for bi plus people and non-nuclear families. Before we begin, I want to thank my colleague Rhiannon Ling, who is on the screen before you. Rhiannon is joining us behind the scenes today mostly. Rhiannon is a brilliant theater maker, filmmaker, and storyteller who provides script consulting on plays and musicals here at Rewrite the BiLine. She's going to be monitoring the Q&A throughout the event, so please drop your questions into the Q&A box at any time. We'll answer some of them as we go and then save others for the end. Okay, so
And I do just want to pop on to say from a technical
please.
perspective, make sure if you have questions that they are not being dropped in the chat, but into the Q&A. That will be the easiest way to make sure they are seen. And so that way we can give them the attention that they deserve. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Rhiannon. Wonderful. So at Rewrite the Byline, we spend a lot of time thinking about stories, not just the stories we tell, but the stories our institutions tell about whose lives matter. You know, bi plus people make up the largest segment of the LGBTQ plus community, yet we're often erased from public conversation. If we do appear, we're too often portrayed as confused, untrustworthy, hypersexual, or incapable of commitment. And those stereotypes don't stay on television screens. They shape policies, workplaces, healthcare systems, and economic outcomes. Today, nearly 1 in 3 bi plus women live below the federal poverty line. Many bi plus people rely on public benefit programs that are increasingly under threat. And for those in diverse family and relationship structures, those challenges can be even greater. One study found that people in polyamorous relationships are more likely than those in monogamous ones to earn under $40,000 a year, which really brings us to today's topic. For generations, feminism has challenged the idea that there's only one correct way to build a life, raise children, share care, or form relationships. Yet many of our laws and institutions still assume a very specific family model, which is a straight married couple with biological children living under one roof. But as we know, that's never been the whole story. And as someone who grew up in an immigrant family, I learned really early on that family is often much bigger than the people who share your last name. Families have always taken many forms, from multi-generational households to queer families, immigrant kinship networks, single parent families, and polyamorous families. And these relationships provide love, they provide care, stability, and belonging, even when our policies and our laws fail to recognize them. So the good news is that reality is already ahead of our laws and policies. So people are creating expansive networks of care and love every day. They're raising children, caring for older adults and people with disabilities, supporting partners and friends, and building communities that don't fit neatly into what some may call a traditional box. So the question today isn't whether families can look different. Obviously, they can, and they do. The question is, what will happen if our laws, our institutions, and our cultural narratives finally caught up with the ways people actually care for and love one another? So, to help us explore these questions, we have an incredible panel of thinkers, advocates, and leaders here today. And I'm so honored to be in conversation with them. And I can't wait for all of us to learn from from their insights. I'm going to introduce each of our panelists as I pose them a question. And I'd actually like to start with you, Megan. So, Dr. Megan Burke is a philosopher working at the intersection of embodiment, feminist politics, and queerness. They hold a PhD in philosophy and they spent the last 15 years in academia before leaving to work as a thought partner with leaders in social impact and movement spaces. So, Megan, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Christina. So happy to be here.
Yeah. Okay. So as someone who studies media narratives, I often joke that, we can believe in dragons and vampires and multiverses, but somehow we struggle with the idea that families might look different from one another. But feminist philosophers like yourself have really long critiqued the nuclear family model as a natural or inevitable social unit. What do these critiques really teach us about the role of, quote, the family in society?
Yeah, I love this question, and there's so many different ways to answer it, but I think the key insight for me is that the family is never a private or personal arrangement. It's a political one. So through and through, which means that the family is a unit of governance in our lives, and not just in the political sense, but it's a primary mechanism through which ideology and, of course, harmful ideology gets its grip in the private realm and manufactures desire for a family structure. So people come to desire the nuclear family structure that is at its core about unfreedom and oppression dressed up as intimacy. So that means on a broader scale, the critiques show us that how the family is legislated and authorized and governed and then lived out is central to how oppression operates. But that also means it can be a site of resistance and reimagining. But in a kind of white heteropatriarchal society like ours, the nuclear family is not only the cultural norm, but it's enforced as a vehicle of domination rather than one of liberation. And as you kind of mentioned in the beginning, that imposition can falls hardest on those who can't or won't fit its terms. I think empirically, this critique that the family is never a private arrangement, but a political one, and the nuclear family in particular as a certain structure of family, the way it plays out in lived experience really shows us that it's a mechanism of oppression. So, I mean, the nuclear family model is the root of a striking number of modern social issues, and it's especially dangerous for women and children. Like it breeds violence, it locks in an unfair distribution of domestic and emotional labor. It disenfranchises women politically. It secures their economic dependency on men. It makes it extremely difficult for queer families to reach the material stability they need to flourish. And it encourages a self-sacrificing model of motherhood that cuts through women's agency while delegitimizing and sometimes criminalizing any family structure that doesn't fit the mold. And like you said, we often can't imagine our image world is so saturated with the nuclear family model because it's romanticized in media and social conventions, and then it's incentivized at the social and political level. And that's pretty troubling given what we know the nuclear model bears out. And I think even where feminist thinking has been remarkably successful at exposing the nuclear family's harms, we know that it hasn't loosened its hold. I think the critiques bear this out.
Thank you so much, Megan. That's like so sad to hear all the different ways in which the fact that there is this nuclear family model that has been glorified and how that's actually creating so many problems for so many other folks. And I think what you're speaking to is that the way that the law tends to draw these bright lines around who counts as family. So I really want to turn to you, Fatima. Fatimah Hameed-Burne is a senior staff attorney at A Better Balance, which is a national legal advocacy nonprofit dedicated to promoting fairness in the workplace and working to ensure all individuals can care for themselves and their loved ones without risking their economic security. Um, Fatima, I know you have seen so much over the years. Where do those bright lines or boundaries show up most often in everyday life, and how is A Better Balance pushing against them?
Yeah, so a better balance. The work that I do there is in paid leave policy, and so I'm going to focus in on that. And the bright lines that we get are around who even you get to call your family for purposes of paid leave, and really the approach to like our messaging around benefits in the U.S., by which I just mean things that are structured by the government to make life a little bit less difficult is really just to approach them not as things you inherently deserve, but as like an add-on that you're lucky to get. And we often build from a bare minimum approach. And through our policy work at ABB, we really want to challenge that, that we do deserve and should expect something better. Um, and when it comes to paid leave policies, inclusively defining family is essential in these laws to making sure that people can actually access the policies when they need them. Um, Currently, the only federal law we have is the FMLA, which provides unpaid leave to take care of yourself or a family member if you're lucky enough to meet the very strict qualifications for it. And under that FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act is family just includes a spouse, a parent, or a child. And clearly, this is very limiting because, as you've already talked about, families include so much more than that. The people that we are responsible for caregiving for, the people that we want to be there to support, go well beyond that. What about your non-married partner? What about your in-laws? What about a neighbor who needs assistance getting to an appointment? And we could say that government takes time to catch up to what people actually need. But the fact is that inclusive family definitions are nothing new, whether to federal, state, or local laws. Um, the FMLA itself recognizes in loco parentis relationships for children that you care for that may not be related by blood. Um, the federal government has had a chosen family standard for decades, since the Vietnam War, to allow military members to take funeral leave for chosen family, um, and for sick leave generally. And federal workers are able to take time off for caring for chosen family. It's a broader definition than we have access to through the FMLA. For those of us lucky enough to live in states that have uh, statewide programs for paid family medical leave or guarantees of paid sick leave, there are increasingly uh, expanded ways to look at, who should count as family. And that's something that has kind of been changing and growing. And really what it makes us think about is it's a question of who do we say is worth caring for and who are you allowed to care for? And these questions, the answers given by the government don't often reflect the actual care relationships. And so really our approach uh, to pushing against these bright lines is really to just emphasize that we all deserve to care and be cared for independent of any of our institutionalized relationships, and that we exist well beyond those.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's really exciting to see the work that's being done at the state level and even at a more local level. And for that, I also want to turn it over to Councilmember Chelsea Lee Byers because we've been making some really exciting work or really exciting progress that is in the city that she was mayor of last year and is a council member this year, the city of West Hollywood. For those of you who don't know Councilmember Byers, she is a community organizer in the truest sense of the word. She was first elected to West Hollywood City Council in 2022 and served as mayor last year and has been such a champion for this work. Councilmember Byers, welcome. West Hollywood has historically been a place. I think everyone on this call recognizes it as a place where LGBTQ plus people can build families outside the confines of some of the other cultural norms that might be in place in other parts of the country. And also outside the confines of narrow legal structures. How has the history of the city of West Hollywood shaped the city's approach to family recognition today?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on the call. Really great to learn from you all here too. We know West Hollywood's approach to family recognition has been deeply rooted in the experience of the LGBTQ people who helped shape the city from the time of incorporation, who long understood that the laws are not what create and define what families look like, and in fact can't. The city was founded in 1984 during the height of the AIDS epidemic. And if we think back to that time, a time when not only had queer people experienced the sense of alienation and rejection from their own birth families, but we're also experiencing the systemic oppression and alienation from institutions like hospitals, where their new founded family and loved ones were facing some of the deepest need for care of their lifetime. And the city founded at this time really recognized that essential to family was a law and a government that was able to help support people in their own definition of that. So in 1985, we were founded in November of 1984. In early 1985, the city adopted its first groundbreaking ordinance, its domestic partnership ordinance, allowing those early protections, hospitals, jails, before the state of California was ready to allow people to have access to these sort of rights. The city was able to do that. And the city pushed it further early in those days, too, by making sure that any of the contractors that we partnered with, any of the companies or businesses that took public dollars from the city, were also invested in securing and supporting these rights for the people that they worked with. So that was an exciting way that the city started to leverage its power and public dollars to push further on these laws. And again, that history being founded as a city at the height of the AIDS epidemic under a president who didn't recognize or support queer people and in financial ways either, allowing people to make home with one another, supporting each other through illness and loss, that legal system really refusing to support and recognize those relationships. It was West Hollywood that recognized the role that a municipal power could play in defying and differently defining what was possible for people. And we've seen that continue to this day. I'm really grateful to Rewrite the BiLine for bringing the opportunity forward to recognize that multi-partner families, polyamorous relationships needed this sense of protections, especially again in the face of a presidential administration who is making people question their sense of stability and security on a financial front when it comes to their jobs, on a housing stability front when it comes to the housing discrimination that may be open to them newly. So I was really proud to help continue West Hollywood's groundbreaking work of expanding that non-discrimination ordinance. And the month after, our mayor, who was there at the founding of our city 42 years ago, brought back another domestic partnership ordinance update to include multi-partner families, and we're working on that still. So I think West Hollywood's history really gives us a broader understanding that family recognition goes beyond marriage equality alone. That was certainly an enormous victory, but really queer people have always created networks of love, caregiving, and friendship and mutual responsibility that don't fit those narrowly defined conventional definitions. And I think it's been our role as a city to make sure our laws recognize the reality of people's lives rather than forcing people's lives to conform to the limitations of law. Thanks.
Oh, so well said. I'm so grateful for the work that the city of West Hollywood has been doing. Thank you, Councilmember Byers. And I think one of the things you're also speaking to is how West Hollywood has really been pushing against what Megan and I have called the poly presumption. So I wanted to turn back to you, Megan. And as I do, I also just want to remind our audience that they can put any questions they have for the panelists in the Q&A box. If you can't find it, feel free to put it in the chat. But if you can, put it in the Q&A box, and don't be shy because we really do want to know your questions and answer them. Okay, so Megan, our legal system is built on what you and I have termed the poly presumption. Can you share more about what that means and how you see it show up, not just in the legal system, but really in everyday life? and what effects it produces.
Yeah, as we define it in our op-ed, so I'm just going to give that definition. The poly presumption is the belief that the non-monogamous structure of a relationship is to blame in a breakup or a conflict, and that the burden is on the people in the non-monogamous relationship or to prove otherwise, like to prove that something is okay and stable and normal about the relationship. So this shows up in a variety of ways. Like one of the ways that we talk about, and that I think and that I hear often just in like everyday life is that if someone opens their marriage, there's these assumptions and even like scoffing that something's going to go bad, or that if poly people have a breakup or experience a breakup, the assumptions are often ushered in that there was something wrong from the get-go, like, oh, that was bound to happen just because it's a non-monogamous relationship. Mention a few other examples, but ultimately it's like a cultural jury that is in place that judges and scrutinizes non-monogamous relationships in advance, like from the get-go, rendering them suspect and bad. And that judgment and suspicion doesn't come from nowhere. It's a downstream of something I think more structural, which is compulsory monogamy, or the idea that monogamy isn't just a way to do intimacy, it's the only legitimate one. So like baked into laws that obviously are being challenged at Councilman Byers, in West Hollywood. But it's so compulsory monogamy is so deeply assumed, it stops like looking like a choice. It stops showing up as a structure or as an institution. And you can see that everywhere. And I think that everywhereness is where the poly presumption then follows. So it's compulsory monogamy is like rooted in +1 invitations and health insurance policies where there's no category for multiple partners, and hospital visitation practices and tax code, in these nuclear family months that are coming out. And it's also like right deeply baked into our image world. Fairy tales end in a happily ever after of a couple, usually a heterosexual one, but oftentimes these days also non-heterosexual couples. Rom-coms are built around entire plots around choosing between two people, and the attention is that you can only pick one. And there's like the chaos of having to pick the one. And I think that kind of chaos is indicative of what the poly presumption points out, that non-monogamous relationship structures are imagined to be inherently unstable and inherently chaotic or all about sex. And none of this is like written down as compulsory monogamy or that monogamy is mandatory, but it doesn't have to be. It's just what everything gets built around. And so that default is what produces the double standard that we're describing. When monogamous people break up or have tension, people just ask what went wrong. But when poly people break up or experience conflict, it's like, what's wrong with polyamory? And so that's what we're pointing out with the poly presumption.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, once I realized that the reactions I was getting from people about my own family and relationship structure wasn't personal, but structural, it really changed my way of thinking about social change. So, like you said, the poly presumption shows up in everything from tax law to insurance to housing. And I want to turn back to you, Councilmember Byers, because in addition to your really forward-thinking work in the city, you also are a national housing expert. And housing policy often reflects assumptions about what a household should look like. So, what are some of the examples of where housing rules can unintentionally exclude diverse family and relationship structures, including polyamorous people? And if you want to share more about what our non-discrimination ordinance is helping to protect in West Hollywood, you can, or you can speak to it at a national level as well.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to share about this because I think the artificial and arbitrary caps that we put in place on housing have become one of the most problematic sort of facets of oppression that are operating at the local level across the country. And it's a challenge to undo because city by city, we have to think about these land use patterns. And this has been in place for many, many years, and it was put in place for some really sinister reasons, really to uphold the country's history of racial segregation. And we've continued to use it to uphold a white supremacist lens to how we operate and function as a country. And It's complex to say that that just happens through our housing code and our zoning code in this country, but it's the case. And we see it play out in diverse family lifestyles, including polyamorous families. Thinking about how hard it may be to find a house big enough to suit your family's needs. Those are restrictions that are put in place to protect or preserve the character of neighborhoods. We make it hard to build big unit sizes for apartments, condos, homes itself. We make it hard to build homes with many apartment or bedroom units inside of it. I do work with folks in Utah where this is impacting people who are choosing to have many children under one roof. Being able to limit the size of homes is restricting the family size, which goes against those lifestyles. Putting the cap on the physical number of people who can be under one roof above a certain age is also an immensely impactful policy towards polyamorous families. That can include how many people can live under a roof or how many people can be signed on to one lease. Without being signed on to a lease, you can be in a really economic, unstable or uncertain position, liable for harassment from a landlord that can really put you and your whole relationship structure into jeopardy. And these are choices that cities and city officials can make and can choose differently constantly that don't just have impact for polyamorous families, but many diverse family lifestyles, immigrant families, as it was mentioned earlier, who may embrace a multi-generational style of living, may have multiple adults living under one roof, and that may be restricted in either specific neighborhoods within one city, which can limit your economic opportunities, the distance it takes you to travel or commute to a job. It can limit just your experience living in a safe neighborhood because of where the type of housing that you need to accommodate your chosen lifestyle just happens to exist. And that these patterns exist city by city all across the country makes it really difficult when we layer that with the affordability crisis that housing has made more complex. It gets even more sinister, I believe, because it is in cities or states that have legal protections that we find housing most expensive. And so we are making it financially infeasible for families who require this most safety protections to find housing in the places where those protections exist. It's a really unbalanced scale. So for many reasons, and including the financial opportunities that exist around affordable housing itself, there may be limitations for who and how people may be able to apply, let alone the fact that every building, every renter may be subject to the biases and discrimination and judgment of a landlord. And on a case by case and city by city basis, those are handled differently. So there are so many ways that we know housing should be a human right and is one of the ultimate sources of foundational stability and financial and economic well-being for people, and that we've made it very difficult, to say the least, for people who are living in polyamorous family circumstances is something that I hope that the policy, the non-discrimination ordinance that we passed in West Hollywood can start to address. At the very least, we know that people who are experiencing that type of judgment and harassment on the basis of their chosen lifestyle will have a case to make in terms of their discrimination, and that will create more safety for them. And there's a lot more that we have to do because these housing laws exist layer by layer, city, county, state, and federal housing policy. But at the very least, we're starting to make a case that it is not an okay circumstance to create discrimination on the basis of your lifestyle.
Thank you so much. Yeah, the fact that our laws and policies are set up to benefit the nuclear family model, I think what you're bringing out is it doesn't just affect polyamorous people. It affects all of us. It affects, like we're saying, step parents, immigrant kin networks, other chosen family members, and it affects us all on a lot of different issues. Fatimah, when it comes to workplace policies on family leave, caregiving leave, bereavement leave, what kind of progress are we seeing and where's the opportunity for more? We obviously have a lot to do on the housing front, but we're making at least some great progress, I think, on these forms of paid leave.
Yeah, it's interesting. We are just seeing increasingly that inclusive definitions of family, including diverse families in these policies. It's just becoming more and more accepted into these paid leave policies. And there's such a power in normalizing those definitions being broader. Because when a paid leave policy has an inclusive definition and the sky doesn't fall down in that place, it shows that the policies work and that these expansions can improve policies, and they can work elsewhere. So really, the importance of local laws is so huge in starting that normalization process for a lot of places. That's how we've kind of seen these things expand from when we're talking about paid leave. California was a very early adopter of getting a paid leave program, a paid family medical leave program, and that was huge. But it had a pretty limited definition of who you could care for. It's now been expanded to include chosen family, so you can care for a designated person is how it's referred. And that could be someone who is just outside of the institutionalized relationships that you have. But it's still not enough because getting to choose one designated person a year doesn't help you if you have multiple family members that need care. So, it's little by little that we're seeing these improvements. And it's really important to look at how this is playing out in different places. So Washington, for example, is a place that has reported that their family definition, their inclusive family definition, and their paid leave laws has been hugely successful. It hasn't been a significant cost driver in increasing like premium rates for those programs, but the impact that it has for actual people is so huge, and it promotes equitable access to leave. And as we've seen in West Hollywood, local policies are such an amazing opportunity for impact. However, since many benefits are available at the state level, many rights may not reach people when the change is only at the local level. So, and often localities are preempted by state laws for making larger change. And that's part of that systemic oppression of how these systems are built to uphold these very specific structures of power. And the policy that's been like a new baseline from which to build is that every time a place has a definition of family, it creates something new for the next program to build from. So like newer states with paid leave are having broader family definitions. And as we've seen states take on broader definitions as granted and expected, we're seeing them introduced into federal bills as well, and that's huge. The federal paid leave bill that has been introduced, the Family Act, and the federal paid sick days bill, the Healthy Families Act, they are just now including broader definitions of family that include individuals related by blood or whose close association is the equivalent of a family relationship. That is the model definition that ABB tries to recommend. And when we see those inclusive definitions being baked in to these laws that are being proposed, even when they're not making it forward, for example, we don't expect federal paid leave to move forward in the next year, but baking them in just sets the stage for the next when it next moves seriously for it to already be present and for us to already have that expectation. So I think that is just a really, really key important thing for how we can use these opportunities to really change things.
Well, that's really exciting. And I love how both you and Councilmember Byers spoke kind of about this iterative process. So like if you look at the city of West Hollywood being the first city in the country, maybe the world, to establish a domestic partnership registry back in the 80s and how that helped push other municipalities and eventually the state, eventually the country. But it's a process, right? Like you have to start at some place and kind of that creates the opportunity for more forward movement. And what you spoke about, Fatimah, even here in California, like California was very kind of forward thinking with paid leave, but it wasn't like at the level where it needs to be today or even back then, but definitely not today. And so it took another step and it reformatted what it meant to be a little bit more inclusive for family. Like you're saying, it's not quite fully there yet, but this is a process, and it's exciting to see that forward momentum. I know we've been talking a lot about like places like West Hollywood, but I know that A Better Balance does a lot of work in conservative southern states too. So maybe I could just ask you a follow-up question, Fatima, about for someone who, is perfectly happy with a quote, traditional family structure, why should they care whether society expands its definition of family?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And, at ABB, our goals are really to increase access, rights and benefits for all workers, regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum. Our policymaking um, uh, is not about that. So we do a lot of work in conservative areas, and inclusive definitions for family, they matter for everyone. You've already given so many great examples, like multi-generational families, caring for neighbors. The military context is somewhere that has used inclusive family member definitions in the federal space, and we recommend something that's as broad as possible and allows for open interpretation. Um, because we see even where policymakers kind of prioritize this idea of traditional nuclear family, talking practically about care and what care looks like can be really helpful. So we see that these broader ideas of family really do resonate with people. When we talk to folks about caring for the people in your lives, like your neighbors, your grandparents, a lot of times we hear from folks in church communities who support one another. And so these are all ways in which we see that this is the idea of traditional nuclear family um, does not cover what care actually means, what care actually looks like. And one thing that we've also seen is that just in addition to like the actual statutory definitions, which can sometimes be hard to, they can just become talking points for opposition. We've seen that agency rulemaking can actually be a really good place to shore up some of these definitions, especially in places where there may be pushback for a more explicitly uh, broad definition. And rules and regulations can provide guidance that allows definitions to be interpreted broadly, that reduces barriers to like the type of documentation you may be required to show, oh, this person is a family member, or this person is someone that I am should be able to care for. Um, and this is clearly working because we just saw this year, Virginia became the first Southern state to pass both paid family medical leave and paid sick leave. And their laws have a really broad definition that allows care for the various family structures, chosen family. It's a really exciting thing. And anyone that you have an expectation to care for, a responsibility to care for, it's broader than most places. And so, clearly this need goes beyond, conservative, liberal, anything, it's well beyond the political spectrum. These things affect everyone. And I think once you really explain that to people and explain like, oh, well, do you want to care for the, like your elderly neighbor? Then I think it just opens the door for us to make things as broad as possible and as inclusive as possible.
Thank you so much. Great. Well, I know that we have some questions from the audience. I'm going to ask Rhiannon to come back on and ask away some of your questions.
Yes, brilliant. Thank you for sending in some questions, y'all. And please, if you have one while we're talking, just send it on in. We're going to start with one from Stephanie for all of you. And she says, I'd love to hear about the influence of popular media on these definitions of family, be it queer-focused media, poly-focused media, etc., or something like Full House that show a group of adults raising children together. I was talking to friends about how we're surprised we don't see as many Full House-type families highlighted in our society today when so many of us grew up with that model on TV. So very broad, but how does popular media influence definitions of family?
I could start off as folks are thinking, given that Rewrite the BiLine is focused on changing the narrative on bi plus people and non-nuclear families in film, television, and the media. I actually just listened to a podcast that Jodie Sweetin, who played Stephanie on Full House, and she was talking about how playing that character at whatever age she was, like 5 years old, actually impacted her because she was adopted. And being able to see a non-nuclear family model was and be part of that in that fictional world was really empowering. And it made me think about as a child watching that show and how it did give me this like love for San Francisco because there were not two dads, there were three dads. They weren't named dads, but they were three dads taking care of these children in San Francisco, which has obviously been for many, many years so welcoming of LGBTQ plus folks. So it's interesting to see how even just visually it can change the way you think about your own dynamics. And I know for me, I came out later in life as a bi plus person. If I had had better representation of bi plus folks on screen, I mean, the 90s was terrible for representation. Like I didn't see myself as the murderer, the cheater, the vampire. Like there was no good representation. So I didn't even have access to the language. So being able to imagine the person that you want to be or the family dynamics that you want to have, you want to see that reflected back to you on screen. And so that's part of the work that we're doing with Rewrite the BiLine is making it clear that there are so many different ways to love and care for one another, not only with the policy work that we're doing, but with the script consulting work that we're doing to help change that narrative. Megan.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things that come to mind. I mean, I think popular media can both like reify, meaning like make stronger the social conventions and social mandates about family that we want, and then they can also challenge them, right? Like the image world that we are saturated in has a deep impact on what we imagine to be possible, which is the point Christina is making, and like how we come to take up who we are. So it is why media representation matters. And if we think about it in the context of like the political environment we're in, the media that gets out is really significant. Like I'm curious about the political context in which Full House was popular, right? Because like Full House is still a white family, it's a widowed father. And there's like some kind of, even though there's like chaos, it's also like this kind of tidy, controlled environment. And I'm thinking about like other non-traditional multifamily households represented on TV at the time, like Family Matters, especially like Black families, where they're like chaotic. They're like not as controlled and tidy. And definitely in that political context of the 80s and 90s, like that's significant. And like I know if we think about today, if you like what shows up on your like For You page on Netflix, and then if you are someone to like go on like Fox TV, you're going to see really different media representations of family. And I think that like links back to that feminist critique that it's an ideological apparatus and it can do really powerful things to what we imagine to be possible and like how you come to take up yourself in the world. So I think like media is one architecture, and then like what Chelsea was saying about housing is this other way, right, in which compulsory monogamy, the nuclear family become incentivized, right? Because it's like those are the things I want for myself. I want a home, I want recognition. So then you end up taking your life up in this way rather unconsciously because it starts like so young.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very, very poignant. I can absolutely emphasize what, I mean, both of you have said, but especially what Christina said, if I had seen myself represented growing up, I'm sure I would have liked myself a bit more and been a bit more convinced of the life I could have. But keeping on the similar media line, we have a question from Adi here. Can you please share some examples of movies or TV shows that do a good job representing non-traditional family structures? If anybody has any that come to mind.
Well, I will just do a plug for our next webinar, which is on Wednesday, August 5th, also at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And we have one of the co-creators of Six is Not a Crowd who's going to be on. It's an HBO Max show, 1 season, Spanish language. Javier and his co-creator are from Argentina. It is beautiful. It's hilarious, but it doesn't make polyamory the butt of the joke. And instead, it really flips that script in a really like fun and creative way. So I loved it. It was the first time that I was like, wow, like I see myself, and I was like, I gotta find these co-creators and like reach out to them. And they're doing some more exciting things down the road too. So we're starting to see some positive movement there with regards to polyamory. But I think I know who Adi is. So I think I've already mentioned that to him. So I'd love to hear if other folks are seeing some good representation out there.
We have someone in the chat, Rose, shouting out Sense8, which was a show I loved when it was on.
I'm just thinking back to, even the Full House example is making me think like these are things that have always kind of been around in like where if you look to find them. I think of Hey Arnold and like, the whole house and he's growing up with his grandparents and there are all of these other folks who live there that care for each other and so it's like I think that when you have these things to be able to like show people, give them as examples to be like, this is where practically, how would we make sure that this person gets, whatever rights they deserve, through the law and policy. So I don't know, that's one that just jumps out to me. Not a current show, but it was something that impacted me a lot growing up, just being able to see that structure.
I think Steven Universe is also a cool show, a way to like think about LGBTQ representation at like a kids level, even though I think the cartoon isn't just for kids. And I know we're not talking about just LGBTQ representation, but the way in which like non-traditional kinship, friendships show up. I think that's a good example of a media representation.
Yeah. Oh, I love all of these. Some of them are great nostalgic hicks. We have another question here. How can the average person get involved? Is there volunteer opportunities or places to donate? And I assume that means just to support non-nuclear families and the work that all of you are doing.
Well, I love that question. Thank you so much. You can go to our website, rewritethebyline.com. We are actually a hybrid social enterprise. So we have a for-profit arm that allows us to do a lot of our policy advocacy work and our script consulting. And then we have a nonprofit arm that allows us to do things like this and bring people together for dialogue and conversation and learning. So you can make a tax-deductible donation at rewritethebyline.com. Press the donate button. It'll take you to our fiscal sponsor social good fund. And then if you're interested in getting involved in local work here in West Hollywood, we haven't talked too much about it. This is a mostly C3 conversation, but we are doing some exciting stuff with the city of West Hollywood with regards to multi-partner registries and taking that work that the city of West Hollywood did early on in the 80s with domestic partnership and, moving it even further down the line to support multi-partner families as well. But love to shout it out to my panelists too, to also share how they can get involved with a better balance and other initiatives that Megan and Councilmember Byers are working on.
Yeah, it's for a better balance. Our website, we have a newsletter that you can sign up for. We also have a donation page that, we're always welcoming. Also, I want to point out that we have a free helpline. It's a legal helpline that's completely confidential, and it's for folks across the country to call in and, if you have any issues regarding your workplace rights, including things regarding family definition. You can just get a lot of information from folks there, and assistance if you're running into any issues on that. So yeah, and we always have, I think if you get involved with our newsletter, well, we always have folks like sharing their stories as well. I think that's just a huge part of like, this is exactly what Rewrite the BiLine is doing, like just making that conversation really visible for people. So we really encourage people to, to share and to just make these issues feel salient for everyone, because they are, and often like we're dealing with them in silence in our own silos. And yeah, so just a few ways.
Yeah, I just want to add, I mean, I think, we might not think about it as volunteering, but showing up to spaces like this, continuing to educate yourself, to pay attention to social issues, to learn more about things that you don't know, about experiences that you don't have, is a way to participate in social change, and to continue to think about your relationship in the world and with others, I think is also a central part of that work. It's one way to push change forward, is to also change what's inside of our consciousness.
And I'm sure, and we heard it already, that people are signing on here from beyond the city of West Hollywood. And if you're in any city other than West Hollywood, Oakland, or Berkeley, there's lots of work to do on this set of issues. So getting involved at the local level, making relationships with their city council members, it really took co-governance to make this happen, having an open door as a city council member, but also having relationships in these communities, having the network, and not every council member has those. So it's really up to us as advocates to help build those bridges to these city council members, help get to know these stories so that they can be a champion. I really know that, especially in this moment, there are so many people looking for ways that they can be stronger support, make their city a safer place for the queer community. And this is such a tangible sort of set of tools and ideas that we can deliver to council members. And we can't wait for them to be the change we need to be in the world. We have to go out there and help make it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rhiannon, for sharing the questions from the audience. If we didn't get to your question, we will try to follow up with you, but please stay in touch. So before we go, I want to end on a positive note. We've talked about, I think, some forward movement that we're making as a larger movement. And we've also talked about the ways that there are still a lot of things that need to be done. But I tend to be like a pragmatic idealist of sorts. So I like to think big. And I'm going to ask my final question to each of the panelists. I'd love if you could imagine we're having this conversation actually 20 years from now. So that's not too far, but it's far enough. And what would you hope has changed about how people in the United States understand family? It can be just like one thing, or it can be like, a full view of what that future will look like. And I'll start off with Megan.
This is difficult to focus on one thing, but I'm just going to think about just the possibility of choice and what's genuinely available to us as families that we can choose, rather than ones we might get forced into or minimize or diminish because of the way social architecture and convention is up. I hope for all of us that that choice is far more expansive in a really concrete way.
Thank you. I love that. Choice is key. Maybe Chelsea?
Yeah, I want to see us legislate with a broader set of experiences in mind. And I think 20 years from now, I mean, from the time that we started talking to the time the ordinance passed and went into effect, maybe like 13 months. So I don't know, if we get started, we can see a whole lot of that work happen in that amount of time.
Beautiful. Fatima?
Yeah, similarly, it's hard to focus on one thing, but when thinking about the paid leave work, hopefully we have guaranteed paid leave across the country so that it doesn't matter what zip code you live in and your rights shouldn't change from one place to another. And hopefully we have kind of broad policies that have broader conceptions of what family and care is like, who we're responsible to. It moves us to towards an understanding that we should care for each other as communities, make life better for one another. So very much the idealism shining through, but just being able to imagine that we are moving towards structures that lead to more care for more people.
Oh, I love that. And you used the word imagine. It made me think of how, Megan, how you opened this up. It was about being able to imagine something different. I think for me, what in 20 years from now, success would look like a world, definitely a country, but a world where people can turn on the television, open a book, watch a film, or whatever we're doing with technology in 20 years and see families like theirs represented with nuance and with dignity and humanity, and not just as punchlines or problems or plot twists or even political talking points. So yeah, this is very exciting to think about that future. I can't wait to work with you all to bring that about. I want to thank you all for joining. And I also want to end by thanking the Polyamory Foundation for supporting this event, which is part of our Write Us In Summit and series. We have a culminating summit that will be taking place on Saturday, September 19th in West Hollywood. That's co-sponsored by the City of West Hollywood. And Rhiannon can probably share more information in the chat about that. But if you've registered, I will go ahead and also email all of you afterwards with more information about that. And you can follow us for more updates on Instagram, which is at Rewrite the BiLine. But thank you all for being here and for being part of this conversation. We look forward to organizing with you to bring about that beautiful world that we just imagined together. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.